Imagine you build a machine that literally changes the world. You spend an entire century perfecting it, optimizing every single bolt, and you build this massive global empire on its success. And then, suddenly someone taps you on the shoulder and says, yeah, you're gonna have to throw all those blueprints in the trash and start completely over. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we are unpacking one of the most monumental, high-stakes, strategic transitions in modern corporate history. We're looking at Ford's massive, multi-billion-dollar shift from traditional combustion engines to electric mobility. And let me tell you right out of the gate, this is not just some simple product update. It is a terrifying, fundamental reinvention of a legacy giant playing a game of absolute survival. So that brings us right to the core question driving our entire story today. Can a 100-year-old corporate giant actually survive the electric revolution? What we're exploring together here is the ultimate corporate survival story. It's basically a high-stakes thriller, and we have to ask if a legacy automaker can transition fast enough to catch up with the future without accidentally destroying its own profitability along the way. Crossing this chasm isn't just difficult, it's like walking a tightrope in a hurricane. Because these legacy automakers have massive overhead, they've got colossal pension obligations, and sprawling physical factories that you absolutely cannot just flip off like a light switch. They are heavily anchored to the past while desperately reaching for the future. And to truly understand the stakes here, we have to look at exactly how much history is involved. Over a century. Think about that for a second. We really need to remember that Henry Ford's assembly line didn't just participate in the automotive industry, it practically invented the modern industrial age. For more than 100 years, Ford scaled global manufacturing, established these incredibly complex supply chains, and built iconic petrol vehicles that are now deeply, deeply entrenched in the global economy. Now, that century of dominance, it obviously gave them an incredible advantage. But today, those deeply ingrained operational habits are the exact anchor holding them back. It establishes exactly how much they have to lose. They aren't starting from scratch in some shiny new Silicon Valley garage. They are trying to rebuild a massive commercial airplane while they are flying it at 30,000 feet. Now, you might be wondering, why change at all? Why not just keep doing what works and rake in the profits? Well, Ford isn't doing this just for fun. They are essentially being cornered by a tidal wave of 5 massive simultaneous forces. First, governments all over the world are enforcing stricter regulations, basically outlawing their core product over the next couple of decades. Second, technology disruptors, namely Tesla, have proven that electric vehicles aren't just green alternatives anymore. They are highly desirable status symbols. Add in the fact that consumers are now demanding hyper-connected digital experiences, investors are heavily rewarding future-focused mobility companies instead of legacy ones, and you have a perfect storm. Finally, there's just simple competitive survival. Once your rivals pivot, hesitating even for a single moment makes you strategically outdated. Okay, what's really fascinating here is how we have to completely reframe the problem. From the outside looking in, building an EV looks like a simple product change. You just swap out a gas tank for a heavy lithium battery, right? Actually, scratch that. That is absolutely wrong. An EV is essentially a giant computer on wheels. Operationally, getting there requires a massive organizational transformation strategy. When your product changes from primarily mechanical to primarily digital, you suddenly need thousands of software engineers, way more than you need mechanical gearbox specialists. It requires an entirely redesigned supply chain, completely new workforce capabilities, and a total overhaul of manufacturing systems. It's literally tearing a 100-year-old house down to the studs and rebuilding it for a completely new era while the family is still living inside. The sheer scale of this logistical nightmare, it is honestly almost impossible to overstate. Every single aspect of their operation represents a massive, multi-billion-dollar headache. Just take battery supply, for instance. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Ford finds itself competing not just with Toyota or General Motors, but with smartphone giants like Apple and Samsung for the exact same raw materials, like raw lithium. Then, you have to completely redesign factories, integrate these incredibly complex software systems that update over the air, secure sustainable raw materials globally, and plan for massive charging infrastructures. It is a monumental juggling act where dropping even a single ball could mean billions of dollars in losses, or seeing entire production lines grind to an absolute halt. Which brings us to the core financial tension of our story, what we can accurately call the profitability paradox. Here is where the real drama lies, guys. On one side, you have the profitable present, traditional combustion and hybrid vehicles, like those gas-guzzling trucks that are actually funding the entire company right now. On the other side, you have the uncertain future, which requires tens of billions of dollars in EV investments with severely delayed returns. So the crucial point is this fantastic, almost painful irony. Ford must actively sell the very combustion engine vehicles the future is trying to replace in order to actually afford that electric future. They have to use their legacy petrol business to bankroll an incredibly expensive and uncertain electric bet. If the present business falters even a little bit, the future simply cannot be funded. And let's see how this translates into an intense competitive battle on the ground. The contrast here is just staggering. Think about the difference between a legacy automaker like Ford and native EV players like Tesla or BYD. Ford is heavily burdened with the structural complexity of managing a massive, existing global business. They have thousands of internal combustion engine engineers naturally sitting there wondering if they're even going to have a job in 5 years. Meanwhile, native EV companies operate with a major superpower, a completely blank slate. They do not have that historical baggage. They were built from day one for the electric era, allowing for rapid, completely unburdened innovation. Ford is basically running a marathon while carrying a 100-pound backpack of history, while their competitors are sprinting unencumbered in lightweight gear. But, Ford isn't backing down from the fight. To signal to younger consumers, the stock market, and investors that it is aggressively part of the future of mobility and not just some relic of automotive history, Ford is taking massive reputational risks with its most beloved brands. They aren't just making some quirky, niche, experimental electric car to test the waters. No way. They are aggressively investing in flagship models. They electrified the iconic Mustang with the Mach-E, which, let's be honest, traditional gearheads viewed as absolute sacrilege to put that legendary badge on a quiet family SUV. And they electrified their absolute crown jewel, the F-150 with the Lightning. This is a bold, chips-all-in statement that they are completely committed to the transition, no matter the pushback. However, amidst all the talk of billions of dollars, raw lithium, and market share, we inevitably hit a wall. Because a corporation, at the very end of the day, is just a massive collection of people. We have to ground this high-flying corporate strategy in human reality. As this powerful insight states, the EV transition is not only technological, it is also human. Behind every single factory redesign and supply chain shift, there are massive social and organizational consequences. We absolutely cannot overlook the factory line workers, the managers, and the local communities that actually make this giant machine run, day in and day out. To truly grasp this, we have to look at the massive human cost of change sweeping through the industry. Here's a crazy fact to put this into perspective. An electric vehicle has roughly 20 moving parts in its drivetrain, compared to over 2,000 in a traditional internal combustion engine. 20 compared to 2,000. There are no oil changes, no spark plugs, way fewer brake jobs. And why does that matter? Because dealerships make their real money on long-term service, not the initial car sale. Electric cars literally threaten to break the entire dealership business model. Add in the fact that traditional manufacturing roles are shrinking while tech-focused roles are booming and entire supplier networks face existential threats. This creates immense, very real workforce anxiety, making constant, transparent communication and massive reskilling programs absolutely vital if Ford wants to survive the decade. So ultimately, Ford's leadership is caught in this brutal, unforgiving, and near-impossible dilemma. It is a classic Goldilocks scenario where the porridge is either freezing cold or literally on fire. If they move too slowly, they risk strategic irrelevance. They become the next blockbuster video, losing their future customers to competitors and fading into a dinosaur of the past. But on the flip side, if they move too aggressively, they risk catastrophic financial strain and total operational collapse before the consumer market is actually ready to adopt EVs at scale. It's a razor-thin margin for error. Pacing is absolutely everything here, and guessing the consumer adoption curve incorrectly could mean total bankruptcy. So what is the crucial takeaway from all of this for us? Well, even if you aren't running a global automaker, Ford's journey offers a direct blueprint for anyone facing massive technological disruption, whether it's the rise of AI in your own industry or shifts in your career path. First, you've got to manage the old and new simultaneously. You cannot just abandon what pays the bills today. Second, recognize that the impacts go far beyond just the tech. It is fundamentally about people and changing operations. Third, adopt long-term thinking because the real benefits are going to be significantly delayed. Fourth, competitive pressure is going to force you to invest early whether you feel ready for it or not. And finally, the ultimate leadership test is balancing absolute urgency with operational stability. Which brings us to our final lingering thought. The future of the automotive industry doesn't just belong to whoever happens to make the coolest or fastest electric car. It ultimately belongs to the organizations that can manage this brutal, complex, and deeply human transformation most effectively. And that leaves us with a fascinating, provocative question. Will Ford successfully navigate this strategic gamble, reinvent the wheel, and secure its survival for another century? Or will the sheer weight of its own historical legacy relegate it to becoming just a cautionary tale in a business textbook written by a native EV startup? The clock is literally ticking, and the entire world is watching. Thanks so much for joining me for